Batman v Superman was a colossal piece of shit that was so awful that it completely destroyed the DCEU. It killed Superman, it ruined both Doomsday and Lex Luthor, and it still had the balls to build up to the Justice League. It was an unpleasant mess. However, Warner Brothers wasn't done with us yet. A few months after Batman v Superman, we were given the next installment in the DCEU, Suicide Squad. Warner Brothers had already filmed this newest installment in the franchise before Batman v Superman was released. If you look at the first teaser trailer, it's very DC. It was dark, but for once the darkness felt appropriate. This was supposed to be a super villain team movie, so a darker tone would make sense. This was also the first movie in the DCEU that had almost no involvement from Zack Snyder, so it gave us hope that we could see a new type of direction in this universe. But after the negative reception that Batman v Superman received, Warner Brothers went into full-on panic mode and demanded reshoots be done only 4 months before the film's theatrical release. These reshoots were intended to add more comedy and more action. Because of this, the tone of the movie seemed to change with each trailer. The first trailer was a darker, more somber version, the next one was a more upbeat version, and the last trailer was a goofy balls-to-the-wall action movie that was more akin to Guardians of the Galaxy and Deadpool. It was almost nothing like what we were originally shown. Some appreciated the lighter tone considering how miserable the last two movies were, but it just seemed pointless now. Batman v Superman was such a clusterfuck that there's no way you could possibly build a good universe out of it. It's like someone giving you a shiny new wheel for your pet hamster after it already died. It's a nice gesture that's ultimately pointless. But despite the troubled history, Suicide Squad was released to the public in August 2016. Now, I should say up front that I know absolutely nothing about the source material, so I'm just going to focus on this as a movie. So let's set the tone and take a look at Suicide Squad. So this movie takes place about 9 months after the death of Superman. Government agent Amanda Waller wants to assemble a task force to keep the country safe from any superpowered threats like Zod or Doomsday. She decides to use captured criminals with special abilities and intends to force them to perform government missions by offering reductions on their sentences. She also implants explosives in their necks and gives herself the ability to kill any one of them whenever she wants. This team of criminals includes the assassin Deadshot, clown criminal Harley Quinn, the bank robber Captain Boomerang, the pyrokinetic El Diablo, the mutant reptile Killer Croc, and the ancient spirit, the Enchantress. In order to convince her superiors to allow her to use these convicts, she uses the Enchantress's abilities to obtain classified weapon documents from Iran as an example of the team's potential, and she soon receives authorization to move forward with this task force. However, the Enchantress manages to escape from Waller long enough to revive her brother, who is able to free her from Waller's control and unleashes a putty army in the city, causing a ton of mayhem. Waller's task force is soon assembled and put under the command of Colonel Rick Flag. The task force is also joined by Slipknot, and the sword-wielding Katana is assigned to protect Rick Flag. The team is dubbed by Deadshot as the Suicide Squad and is deployed to the city to rescue a VIP and take out the Enchantress and her brother. Just from explaining the plot of this movie, you can already see the first basic problems with it. The first is the plot itself. The movie creates its own villain and it's really stupid. At least in Age of Ultron, Tony Stark creating Ultron had good intentions and seemed to make enough sense, but Waller's plan is terrible from the beginning. She assembles a team of superpowered bad guys, which is already a bad idea because they're bad guys. Did she really think she could control them like this and that none of them could use their abilities to escape? She knows about Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Aquaman, yet she assembles a group of known criminals? Her motivation for assembling this team makes no sense. From what I'm told, in the comics, the team is assembled to carry out undercover missions that the government doesn't want their names on. Here, they're being assembled in an effort to offer defense against people like Superman. Now, this makes sense for characters like El Diablo, the Enchantress, and maybe Killer Croc. But what the fuck will Harley Quinn's bat do against any superpowered people? Who's running in terror from this guy with the boomerang? What about this man's amazing ability to climb things? Yeah, sure, Superman can fly, destroy buildings, has laser eyes, and can move fast enough to break the sound barrier, but does he have this guy's amazing rope skills? Hell nah. Clearly, Slipknot could tie Superman's shoelaces together and end his reign of terror. The motivation to form this team is incredibly forced, and a simple sentence change could fix that major flaw. I find it baffling that not one person working on this movie could see that. So that's the first obvious problem. The next is the amount of characters. This movie introduces way too many characters at once. I won't say it's impossible to set up 9 characters like this, but it would be incredibly difficult and require strategic directing, which we don't get. Instead, we get 2 intros for both Harley Quinn and Deadshot at the beginning of the film, and then really rushed intros for 6 other characters. The pacing for this is so bad that we get introduced to Katana almost an hour into the film. It takes them almost half the movie to give us all the characters. So the first half of this movie is nothing but explaining who these people are and why we should care, and the second half is when it becomes a standard action movie. The reshoots changed the original tone of the film completely by adding a bit more comedy, and they changed the tone further by adding pop songs throughout every character's intro. These songs are so on the nose that it's eye-rolling, and the use of Eminem's Without Me was so out of place it's laughable. I'm going to compare this to Guardians of the Galaxy because this movie clearly wants to copy that film's success. Guardians worked because 1, there were less characters, so it was easier to dedicate time to establishing their backstories and character motivations. In fact, they only really needed to do this for 4 out of the 5 members, since Groot doesn't really need much of a backstory. 2, their team up at first was because they shared a common goal, not because they were forced to. And 3, they weren't bad guys. Sure, they were outcasts and misfits, but they weren't cold-blooded killers like Deadshot and Harley Quinn. Also, the use of pop songs worked in that movie because one of the main characters kept a tape with these songs on them that was connected to his backstory. Also, Guardians of the Galaxy from the start was supposed to be a goofy movie with a talking raccoon and tree. This kind of stuff doesn't really work here because it's a team of terrible people with little to no backstories. A bit of a saving grace for this film is that it has a really solid cast. Like I said, I don't know anything about the source material, but I don't think that this should have been the debut for Harley Quinn in live action. I think a character like that is too big to be introduced in a film this crowded. Let me be clear that I don't think every comic book character needs their own origin story first. We don't need a Mr. Fantastic standalone movie for him to be in a Fantastic Four movie, and we don't need a Negasonic Teenage Warhead movie for her to work in an X-Force movie. And while I don't think we really need a Harley Quinn standalone movie, I think she should have been introduced in a Batman movie with her and the Joker. Then they could dedicate more screen time to her and her backstory, and that movie could have ended with her being arrested, and this film could have served as a sort of sequel to that. I think Harley Quinn is more important than how she is presented here, and I know I'm in the minority, but I really wasn't too impressed with Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. Her accent is incredibly inconsistent.
What was that? I should kill everyone and escape? Sorry. The voices. I'm kidding, jeez. That's not what they really said.
I'm not much of a joiner, but maybe we should. What's the world ever done for us anyway? It hates us.
And her costume is just a constant eyesore. I love Harley Quinn in the animated series, but I've never been a fan of what comic books have done with her character. I feel like she slowly became a pinup girl for women with mental issues, and that a lot of people like the idea of her character more than the character herself. I never thought of Harley Quinn as being too much of a promiscuous character, but one scene from the animated series seems to have tainted her image to be nothing but that. I don't mind this approach for characters like Poison Ivy or Rogue, as their sex appeal has always been a big part of their identity, but in Harley Quinn's case, it seems to have been thrown in retroactively and spread like a disease. And I call it a disease because I've always thought her character is better than that. I can't blame Margot Robbie for that, and I feel like with a better outfit and more time to work on her accent, she could have pulled it off because her actual acting seemed fine. But she just didn't do it for me here. My favorite scene with her is when Batman punches her in the face. Side note, it's great to have more Ben Affleck Batman here. Even with how limited his screen time is here, he's probably still my favorite character in the movie. I couldn't tell you if Will Smith is a good Deadshot because I know nothing about that character, but I actually quite enjoyed him in this movie. Sure, he was just kind of playing Will Smith again in this movie, but I love Will Smith, so it didn't bother me as much. It's hard to see him as a bad guy, but in a movie full of bad guys being good guys, I thought he actually pulled it off pretty well. He's one of the only people in this movie with good lines, and his back and forths with Rick Flag and Harley Quinn are actually pretty enjoyable banter.
Alright, get up there, smack on her ass, tell her knock this shit off.
I do not think that'd be wise.
It's clear he's too good for this movie, but after seeing him in After Earth, part of me was just happy to have fun Will Smith back. Viola Davis as Amanda Waller is a near perfect adaptation as far as I'm concerned. This is almost exactly what I've always imagined Amanda Waller being like. She's cold, strong-willed, and almost frighteningly unpredictable. The only downside with her is that she's dumb and her plan is dumb. which are two major flaws because she essentially creates the villain for this movie, but just as a character, I found her to be pretty good. But she really needs to work on her plans a little more. Maybe these people would listen to you if you took your fucking fingers off the phone screen! I don't have much to say about the rest of the cast as they are pretty glossed over in their characterization. El Diablo is basically a zombie boy. He's able to summon fire, and when he does, it's pretty cool. He's a likable enough character because he actually wants to be a good guy. He wants to carry out his sentence and doesn't want to fight. They don't give his backstory until almost the end of the film, but it's actually probably my favorite out of all of them, and the way it's told is really well done, and I sympathize with him wanting redemption. Him deciding to use his powers again in the middle of the movie was really rushed, and what they did with him at the end is so random that I did a double take, but otherwise I liked him enough. Rick Flag is just kind of there. He's not really interesting, but I didn't hate him. His motivation for leading this mission makes sense, but I know almost nothing about his relationship with the Enchantress's hostess, so it's hard to really care. Half of his lines are just terrible, and the other half are actually quite good.
I'm a soldier, and you're a serial killer who takes credit cards.
I don't really have much to say about him, nor do I really have much to say about Killer Croc. He has no motivation and is just kind of a background character. In fact, you could probably just cut him out entirely and the movie would stay the same. Croc has never really been an interesting character in anything, so it's a bit weird to me that they included him at all, and I really can't get into his design. He reminds me of Michael Chiklis as the Thing. He's so small, he just leaves no impression. Captain Boomerang is probably the most random character in the group. He makes me question Waller's plans even more because they got a guy named Captain Boomerang who is a bank robber to be in this task force. Meanwhile, she forgot to include characters like Admiral Hockey Stick, Commander Paddleball, and General Frisbee. What an idiot she is. He's barely in this movie for the first 45 minutes to the point where I forgot about him. I mean, I kind of enjoy him as a comic relief character. He's the one who doesn't give a fuck about any of this shit and just wants to escape, and his performance is pretty consistent the whole way through. I don't understand his pink unicorn fetish, but I found him entertaining enough that I didn't mind him throughout the movie. I love my baby Katana. Katana-san, omae wa ga aishiteru yo. Hontou ni utsukushii ne. Soshite sugoku kakkoi yo. Ganbatte kudasai. Katana is the coolest looking member in my opinion. When she shows up, I just immediately want to focus on her. She just looks badass, but that's it. She doesn't come up until the 50-minute mark and her introduction is so glossed over.
This is Katana. She's got my back. I would advise not getting killed by her. Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
We're just gonna breeze past that then, aren't we? She goes back and forth between English and Japanese at random, and it makes no sense. Why is she speaking Japanese to Rick Flag? Does he speak Japanese? And he responds in English, and if she can speak English, then why not just speak English? Katana does nothing but action stuff with zero character depth, which is such a shame because she just looks awesome. I think we can all agree that the best character in this movie is Slipknot. I love his... Oh... Was this just a cruel joke on the actor who played this guy? Like, he was at Comic-Con with the rest of the cast as if he was going to be a big part of this movie and this is all he got? That's hilarious. They trolled one of their own, which I guess is good because the ability to climb anything is probably the lamest power of them all. The only person who would be scared of someone who could climb anything is Donald Trump. What would this character even do if he stuck around?
Doomsday is destroying the city again!
Fear not, citizens. I will make a butterfly knot and defeat this monster.
His death helps shorten the cast to a more manageable size, but not by much. The Enchantress and her brother are such non-villains. They are such set pieces that I could not give a fuck about them if I tried. I like how the Enchantress looked when she looked like the girl from The Grudge or The Ring or whatever, but once she turned into this hula witch, I just couldn't care. The way they are defeated is really low-key compared to other superhero villain deaths, and I don't grasp their plan at all. They say they want to make a machine, but it's just another sky portal by the end of it. And why do they need a machine? It looks like they can do a lot of killing without one, so I just don't get it. I guess the last person I need to talk about is the Joker. I don't think anyone could envy Jared Leto's position. He was the first Joker in film since Heath Ledger, and that's not an easy person to follow by any means. I had faith in him until I saw his design. This is one of the worst Joker designs I have ever seen. Why would the Joker get these stupid ass tattoos? I do not get this. I don't mind the Joker having tattoos, but these are so fucking lame. Really, damage right on his forehead. Oh, fuck off with this emo gangster bullshit. There's nothing subtle about these tattoos. It's like the only exposure David Ayer ever had to what a gangster looked like was in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, but even those characters looked more dignified than this. I don't mind doing a gangster Joker instead of a mobster Joker, as I feel a new take is always welcome, but this is just a terrible design. The only way I could see this design working is if this wasn't the real Joker. This would only work if this was just an insane fan of the real Joker trying to emulate him, or if they somehow built off of Tim Drake being driven insane and becoming the Joker's psychotic spawn, but this is not a good design for the actual Joker. And the grills. Oh yeah. How I've missed you, 2005. After I saw this terrible design, I was at least hoping that Jared Leto would give a decent performance, and
By erasing my mind.
no, he's pretty bad. His screen time is limited, which already contradicts all the advertising and how he's listed in the credits, and his performance is just...
You don't want no beef?
He's not playing the Joker. He's playing Jim Carrey playing the Joker.
Alrighty then. Handsome honka honka.
He seems to just be trying to do Ledger again, but not nearly as good. He does the same higher voice thing that Ledger did, but Ledger sounded like a psychopath. This guy sounds like he needs some fucking Mucinex. Oh, and that laugh. That is the least amount of effort I've ever seen in a Joker laugh. Look at him driving. Could he possibly overact anymore? He's just so cringeworthy. It's even worse when you read all the crap Jared Leto did to play this 10-minute role. Not only was it not worth it, but it's just stupid. I don't mind method acting, but there comes a point where acting stops and attention seeking begins, and I think mailing dead rats and used condoms to your castmates is just the grossest form of attention seeking, and none of it benefited his performance. It just makes me hate him even more. He's not as bad as Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor because he is somewhat like his character, but fuck me, I could not stand him whenever he was on screen. I don't know how I feel about him actually loving Harley. The Joker having a romance isn't totally out of character. His origins in The Killing Joke were based on a romance, and he did have the hots for Vicky Vale in Tim Burton's Batman, but his attraction to her was played for laughs and was more of an obsession. It didn't have this attempted underlying deeper meaning, and I think it kind of downplays the tragedy of Harley's character because her whole origin is that she was manipulated by and falls in love with a lunatic who honestly couldn't give two fucks about her. I'm open to a new take on it, but with how limited his screen time is, it makes me wish even more that a Batman solo movie came out before this that properly set him and Harley's origins up to give us a reason to be invested in this romance. It just constantly feels like we missed a movie. A big fault in the actual Suicide Squad is that it seems like there's no reason we need all of them. Let's just keep Rick Flag and Katana for the sake of being in charge. If you want to form a team of actual interesting people, then the team would consist of Deadshot, Harley Quinn, and El Diablo. If you want people that could possibly be a defense against Superman, then you would want the Enchantress and El Diablo. And if you want to have a team of people so complex and interesting that it makes you reconsider your perceptions of what it means to be a hero, then it would be 5 guys who could climb anything. Nailed it.
Coming 2028, Slipknot will climb out of the grave and into your heart.
Part of me is confused as to why a bank robber and a man who climbs things were put in the same jail as a crocodile man, a trained assassin, and a Mexican Charmander. I know I'm kind of all over the place with this review, but so is the movie. There is no focus throughout this whole thing. It's just a mess of scenes. You can tell that this movie was altered in post because not only is the pacing all over the place, but the editing is really terrible. In fact, I'm not entirely convinced that this film wasn't edited by a chimp. The beginning of this movie is just a constant headache of songs with terrible editing that's begging to become a wallpaper. This movie is so desperate to be cool that it fails and becomes cringeworthy. There are so many terrible lines that it feels like they were only put in this movie so they could be put on a shirt and be sold in Hot Topic.
Now that's killer rap.
Put it on a shirt!
Let's just say I put him in the hole and threw away the hole.
Put it on a shirt! It's cool! Put it on a shirt!
I'm known to be quite vexing. I'm just forewarning you.
Put it on a shirt! You can practically hear the movie saying,
We're
"Please
cool.
like us,
Look at how much
please
fun
like
we're
us,
having. Look at how much
please,
fun we're
please like
having."
us." So much of it feels like a desperate attempt to be ironic and cool, but a lot of it just comes off as annoying and dumb. Like when they leave for the mission, they give Harley Quinn a mallet and a bat with some skimpy stripper clothes. Why not armor and a gun? She wasn't even arrested in this outfit. I don't get it. And look at this transition into a scene of Harley trying to be funny.
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
That was in the trailer and there is no build up to it. It's out of nowhere. There's so much stupid shit in this movie that's minor but still annoying, like the whole Harley Quinn death fake out. She's still hanging on the fucking rope. How would we fall for this? And the Joker death fake out? Like, yeah, I really bet you killed him. Wait, I wonder who this guy is at the ending. As subtle as a plane crash. The cliche gang falling apart scene is so forced and out of nowhere, and I love that Katana bails on Flag even though she's not one of the bad guys and has no reason to do so. Captain Boomerang coming back is so out of character and they never address it. The climax is so not interesting. The CGI in this movie is terrible and it really shows here. There's some really cringy use of slow motion. Oh gee, I wonder if Deadshot will catch the gun. And Diablo's little line about not wanting to lose another family is not earned since these people didn't bond until a few minutes before the climax, and that's not enough. The use of putties in this movie is uninspired, and their designs are just terrible. Part of me finds it a little weird that the putties actually use guns. That's random. I think one of the strangest things in this movie is that somehow a team of supervillains have less of a body count than both Batman and Superman. Like, wow, that's really weird. How did you fuck that up, DC? When the movie ends, I just feel like I woke up from a nap. I should bring up that this film had an extended cut just like Batman v Superman, but I didn't notice anything different really. In fact, I wonder why they even bothered cutting out these scenes because I don't think they are really detrimental to the film. I don't think they help the film at all, but unlike Batman v Superman, I don't think that this movie is any more bloated if they are included. At the end of the day, it's hard for me to even look at Suicide Squad as a movie. The whole thing is just a bunch of scenes slapped together with pretty graphics and upbeat music. The first half is just us being told who these people are, and the second half is boring action and forced character interactions. It wants to be cool and fun, but it just falls short for me. It had a couple of things going for it. It's got a great cast, some decent action, and it's more fun than the last two movies, but it's way too disjointed, too nonsensical, and too annoying to really recommend to anyone. I was more positive to this movie when it followed Batman v Superman, because it was nice to have some fun with DC characters again, especially because the last movie was just so miserable and awful. But the more I think about Suicide Squad, the worse and worse it gets, and rewatching it didn't help at all. It just left even less of an impression on me. I would definitely say it's better than Batman v Superman. I don't hate it because that would require any investment. When it was over, I just had a mild headache like I just got done babysitting someone else's kids. I don't know how I would rank it compared to Man of Steel. While I think Man of Steel is probably objectively better, I would rather rewatch Suicide Squad. Man of Steel is a headache as well, but it's the type of headache you get after you're in a car accident. I'll be objective for the rating and say the final score for Suicide Squad is a 3.5 out of 10. It's probably worse than Man of Steel, but I would rather sit through this. At this point, the DCEU just feels like a constant beatdown of expectations. Every time we want a good movie, we just get let down again. If there's anything to take away from Suicide Squad, it's that it gave us the perfect visualization of how Warner Brothers has treated us.
Scumbag.